Many persons on being first introduced to karma demand the precise details of its working, and failing to receive them refuse to accept the law. It is useful to ask them in reply if they know the nature of electricity. If they are truthful they answer, no. To which one may reply, nor does one know the nature of karma, but, like our knowledge of electricity, we know just a little how it works. The rest is a matter of research and experience. It is a strange aberration of the mind that refuses to accept a law of life because it cannot at present grasp its detailed working. We use X-rays, but know very little about them, use wireless, and we are only on the fringe of how it works, and though we have used the laws of light for 3 generations, we are now discovering that our knowledge, at any rate of the straightness of its rays, was far from full. Karma is true or untrue, and only the individual can decide in which category to place it. But to refuse to accept it on the ground that our knowledge of its working is limited is, to say the least, an immodest point of view. It is sometimes said that karma is cold, that it is heartless. Karma is neither warm nor cold. It is. But those who are justly fearful of a world wherein law, as they conceive the term, is paramount, and love excluded from its scope, have enough to fear. If karma is the law of harmony, so is love. Like karma, compassion is no mere attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony. So runs the voice of the silence, which is one of the oldest books in the world. Karma is an aspect of the one, the unnameable, love is another. If karma controls the relations of the myriad parts to each other and the whole, love is the cement that binds them all in one. He who regards karma as a law and his brother as separate from himself does not understand karma. There is but one karma, though each part of the wholeness suffers the effects of what the smallest part has caused. My brother's suffering is my own and mine is his, and in my brother's face I see my own unanswered agony. To say of a suffering friend, it is his karma, may be true, but to assume that therefore it is not yours too is to prison the heart in the iron bars of illusion, and it is the heart which so regards its neighbor, not the law, that is cold. One cannot interfere with karma, as many seem to suppose. A man may have placed himself in a serious predicament, and a friend is fearful lest, in helping him, he is interfering in the working out of his karma. The friend fails to realize that it may be the man's karma that he should be helped, and the help or withholding of it is just as much his karma as his present suffering. The misconception probably arises from the Western preoccupation with its neighbor's affairs, for we are so bent on social service that we forget a greater duty still, our own improvement. Yet the biblical story of the mote and the beam should be borne in mind, and practiced. There may be nothing finer than self-forgetfulness, but the very thought of whether or not one is interfering is self-remembrance, not forgetfulness, and he who helps wherever help is needed, and for the rest removes his own beams from his eye, is doing his duty, and no man can do more. The question has been raised in an extreme form by certain pacifists who, refusing to lend themselves to violence, equally refuse to help a dying man in an air raid lest they should seem to be taking part in the war. Egotism could hardly go further, and such absorption in selfish thinking is pathetic. The law of compassion, which never clashes with that of karma, overrides all else. Inaction in a deed of mercy becomes an action in a deadly sin. Karma will act according to its nature, and needs no help from any man. He who acts according to his heart, as controlled by experience and sweet reasonableness, may act in error, but only by error will he learn his error. For the rest he will earn the merit of doing what he feels to be right, and no man can do more. Those who have studied the Buddhism of the Northern or Mahayana school will have read of the doctrine of merit, and of certain men or bodies of men being fields of merit for the commonweal. It is obvious that a person with a lovely mind will shed a radiance around him in which all may share, and a monastery of persons leading a holy life will radiate its own vibration. But when it is suggested that their efforts will neutralize the evil karma of others, the door is open to the dangerous doctrine of a vicarious atonement. The dangers are obvious. Work out your own salvation, said the Buddha, and there would be chaos indeed if any being, however great, could forgive others' sins. Each time that a repentant sinner is assured that the effects of causes he himself set in operation can be nullified by forgiveness from any source, he is being taught an untruth which cannot but imperil the future development of his soul. Each time a priest pronounces absolution over some terrified being whom the shadows of the gallows, perhaps, has frightened into repentance after a long life of selfishness and crime, he assumes an authority and a power which is absolutely at variance with the law to which he owes his own existence. The doctrines of vicarious atonement and karma are therefore incompatible. But the doctrine of vicarious salvation is a little different, and though easily abused, has a foundation in one aspect of the karmic law. Remembering man's essential unity, both with other forms of life and with the law, which is another aspect of namelessness, it may be seen how the good deeds of one may benefit and so hasten, though never alone procure, the salvation of another. The Bhikkhu Silakara has much to say on the subject in his pamphlet, When, he says, a Buddhist performs an act of merit, and on the pagoda platform, after offering incense and flowers before the image of the Buddha, strikes a great bell which lies beside him, he is not calling on the supposed keeper of the records of karma for another item to be put to the credit of that person. What he is saying is this: all ye to whose ears comes the sound of this bell, know that a deed of merit has just been performed. The doer of the deed hereby gladly offers you a share of his merit from the doing of the good deed, and begs you with equal gladness to accept it. This is a very different thing from expecting the deeds of others to atone for one's own misdoing. To radiate love to all beings is one of the standard meditations of Buddhist practice, and its object, besides suffusing the heart of the meditator with unbounded love, is to assist all living things in their development. For the effect of love is to kill out hate, to dissolve the illusion of selfishness, and to reduce the unworthy desire which is the cause of suffering. If every living thing experiences to some extent the acts of every other, then each can deliberately strive to see that the effects of his own causing are, so far as he can control them, good. Once more, therefore, the inseparability of the threads of karma is a clue to a doctrine which, though easily and frequently abused, is spiritually true. The same clue may provide the solution to another problem, that of unmerited suffering. Do we deserve all that happened to us, or are there occasional accidents in which we suffer without justice? An immediate answer would be that if so, there must equally be unmerited happiness, for which in due course we must compensate with suffering, and that on balance the cosmic harmony within and by the law of karma would be restored. The key to the problem is time, one of the necessary illusions of manifestation. It would be impossible, at least to our conception, to guide an incoming soul to a body and set of circumstances which exactly accord with its needs and deserts, and all that did not do so, pleasant or unpleasant, would presumably be the subject of later adjustment by the all-embracing and utterly just law. There are some who find difficulty in reconciling karma and duty. If all that we do is what we are, and according as we are so we act, what, they ask, is the place of duty in the law's machinery? The answer imports a new term, dharma, in Pali, Dhamma, which, like most keywords in Oriental philosophy, is untranslatable. Many words have been suggested in translation, among them law, duty, the good, the true, righteousness, the norm, the ideal and even the way, but it is the symbol of a concept of too complex a nature to admit of translation by any one English term. It may be described as the outward manifestation of a body of teaching, moral law, doctrine or system of philosophy which has existed for all time, in the abstract world of thought, which is Plato's noumenal realm. Hence the meaning of norm, or ideal form, as the clothing of a vast idea. Considering the word as duty, that which in rightness should be done, it has been said that the dharma of one life is that portion of the individual's karma due to be discharged or worked out in that life. As such, it is one's duty to face it, accept it and so be rid of it, whether it be good or evil. Hence the insistence in nearly every occult work on the due performance of all duty, from the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible to the voice of the silence and the Dhammapada. To quote from the last, by oneself evil is done, by oneself one suffers. By oneself evil is left undone, by oneself one is purified. Purity and impurity belong to oneself, no one can purify another, and then, let no one forget his own duty for the sake of another's, however great. Let a man, when he has discerned his own duty, be always attentive to it. This does but echo the admonition of the Bhagavad Gita, that there is danger in another's duty, and this belief is the basis of the Eastern virtue of minding one's own business, which the West, in its enthusiasm for social service and good works, is apt to ignore. In either part of the world, however, all pilgrims of the path agree that the immediate work, whatever it may be, has the abstract claim of duty, and its relative importance and non-importance is not to be considered at all. And again, there can be no permanent rest or happiness as long as there is some work to be done, and not accomplished, and the fulfillment of duties brings its own reward. Point 1. He who is wise has faith in the law, and knows that in doing what he believes to be right he is using the law to the advantage of mankind. Certain writers have distinguished shades of meaning between the doctrines of metempsychosis, transmigration, pre-existence and rebirth, but for present purposes the word rebirth is used to cover the doctrine which, from the human point of view, is the inseparable twin of karma. In this sense, just as physical progress is effected through hereditary transmission, so spiritual progress is achieved by the process of rebirth. Cause and effect are an indivisible unity, but in the illusion of time the one follows the other. In the opinion of the Bhikkhu Silakara, one might even say that they are the same doctrine, looked at in one case subjectively, and in the other objectively. In a manner of speaking, karma is rebirth latent and for the time being unmanifest, and rebirth is karma become active and manifest. From another point of view, the lessons of karma necessitate a school wherein they may be learnt. Rebirth provides such a school whose terms and holidays succeed one another until the final lesson is learnt. It has been seen that that which reincarnates is not an immortal soul but the product of countless previous lives, a bundle of attributes called character which is changing from moment to moment, and lacks any element of immortality which it could truthfully claim as its own. On the other hand, each such returning unit of life is a ray or spark or aspect of the wholeness which, through the slow experience of its myriad points of consciousness, collectively attains self-consciousness, or, in the words of the mystics, finds itself. The Brahmin philosophy speaks of Atman, Pali, Atta, the spirit in man which is his share in the Absolute, as it were, but by the Buddha's time this spiritual conception had been debased, as in modern Christianity, to that of an immortal soul. Against this degradation of a mighty truth the Buddha taught the doctrine of an Atta, not immortal, soul, destroying the wrong conception of the positive by stressing the negative. In the well-known story of Vakagata the Wanderer, there is a passage on the nature of self which explains the Buddhist and therefore the true Brahmin point of view. Vakagata asked the Buddha what he had to say about the self, but the Blessed One refused to answer. When the questioner had departed in disgust, the Venerable Ananda inquired the reason for his silence. If I had answered that the self exists, the Buddha said, that would be to side with those who are eternalists. But if, Ananda, I had replied that the self does not exist, that would be to side with those who are annihilationists. The answer is further elaborated, but the point is already clear. The self is and is not. That which is reborn is the old man and yet anew. The soul is immortal, but it is changing every hour. As an immortal entity there is no soul, even as a personal deity, there is no God. Analogies sometimes help, and a favorite theme of Buddhist exegesis is the flame. Life is a flame, and transmigration, new becoming, is the transmitting of the flame from one combustible aggregate to another, just that, and nothing more. If we light one candle from another, the communicated flame is one and the same, in the sense of an observed continuity, but the candle is not the same. Note that each candle perishes, but the flame lives on, and note that the flame, though in a way a particular flame, is in essence light, and as such common to all. The proximate force or energy which out of the past material produces a new being is Trishna, the thirst for sentient existence, the libido of modern psychology, but karma is the guiding power behind. The three fires whose burning craves for further fuel are hatred, lust and illusion. Hate is a powerful force, and draws the hater into perpetual dose relation with the person hated until he learns that hatred ceases not by hatred, hatred ceaseth but by love, lust, or personal desire in every form, is an obvious cause of life after life on the wheel of rebirth, but the strongest force is illusion, the mire of ignorance about this very truth of anatta. For the human mind discriminates itself from the things that appear to be outside itself without realizing that it has first created those very things within its own mind, and one of the things which it has itself created is the separation between self and self. Hence the great heresy of Attavada, belief in the separative self. To sum up on this all-important matter of the nature of the thing reborn, there are three selves in man, or, more correctly, he functions at three main levels of consciousness. The mind. On its lowest level is a discriminating mind. On this level it has the ability to see, hear, taste, smell, touch, to combine these sense concepts, to discriminate them, and to consider their relations. On a higher level it is an intellectual mind, where it has the ability to make the inward adjustments that are necessary to harmonize the reactions of the discriminating mind and to relate them to each other and to a whole ego conception. On its highest level it is universal mind. These levels correspond exactly with the body, soul and spirit of St. Paul, and it is at the middle level, that of the soul, that man, the potentially immortal essence of pure mind, reincarnates unceasingly until the potential has become the actual and the dewdrop has become the shining sea. The new life accords with the deserts, or part of them, of all preceding births. By the law of attraction, the incoming man is drawn into the current which will land him in an environment most suited to his spiritual needs. Whether the newborn soul dislikes or likes its environment is immaterial. It made its bed, and now must lie on it. In the new life it may be following still further a line of development already begun, hence definite proclivities in one direction and the desire to pursue them, or it may strike out in a new, and possibly complementary line of progress, or it may, by reason of causes good or bad of past behavior, find itself with utterly new environment and different opportunities for self-expression. In the words of the Light of Asia, who told a slave may come anew a prince for gentle worthiness and merit one, who ruled a king may wander earth in rags for things done and undone. But such a change is not necessarily for the worse. Christ reminded his followers that the rich man's lot was a spiritually hard one, for wealth is apt to bind the awakening mind, and he who clings to wealth of pocket or mind will lose it, even as only he who gives away his very life shall find it. It will be noted that the mind chooses the body and is not its child, as is still the belief of Western materialism. The soul chooses the body most suited to its needs, and therefore comes into the family which will provide that body. If a lawyer wishes further experience as a lawyer, he will probably enter a legal family. If so, he will be a lawyer not because his father was a lawyer, but because, being already a lawyer, a legal brain in the new body will make his task easier. Other factors are the rhythm of the sexes, of the introvert and extrovert types of mind, and of 1,000 other complementary types of character, while men may change the pattern of their lives as the years go by and with it the kind of experience they gain. In all there is infinite variety, not even the element of progress is constant, for blinded with illusion a man may in a single life undo the accumulated merit of many lives preceding, and every conquest made is painfully relative to the distance yet to be run. Veil after veil will lift, but there must be veil upon veil behind. Those who accept or re-accept the law of karma will find that the new conception radically alters the prevailing point of view. Parents, for example, are seen with new eyes, friends are probably old friends, and foes old enemies. Places and people and even things are remembered. The body is seen as an instrument to be, as a dog or horse, well cared for but well disciplined. The various parts in the drama comedy of life are seen for what they are, so many masks assumed for the part, then laid aside when the play is ended. The mental eyes are shortened and yet lengthened in their view. On the one hand, now is the time that matters, now when the lightest act is building the days unborn. Here where the effects of every act must be digested, not in a heaven or hell to be known hereafter. On the other hand, death is not the end of the adventure. Infinite time is ours for the using, and the space available is commensurate with the universe. And the struggle is worthwhile. Yeah? Whoso, shaking off the yoke of flesh lives Lord, not servant, of his lusts, set free from pride, from passion, from the sin of self, toucheth tranquility. Live where he will. Die when he may, such passeth from all plaining. To blessed nirvana, with the gods, attaining. And nirvana is but the death of self, the self that in its piteous pride is unaware that it is of the essence of pure mind. Yet sooner or later each incarnation comes to an end. The mask begins to perish and the actor, laden with new experience received through his senses and his perishable brain, longs for a period of rest wherein to digest the lessons of that life. And so the body dies, not of death but of too much life. The pressure of the electric current in time wears out the lamp, and the lamp must be renewed. Life never tires, nor ages, only the form grows old. At the body's death there is no occasion for grief, and if we mourn but for our foolish selves. When the day's work is ended, night brings the benison of sleep. So death is the ending of a larger day, and in the night that follows every man finds rest, until of his own volition he returns to fresh endeavor and to labors new. So has it been with this our brother, so will it be for all of us, until the illusion of a separated self is finally transcended, and in the death of self we reach enlightenment. When the body has been consumed with fire, and so as swiftly as possible reduced to its natural elements, it is best forgotten. The friend remains, and by a law beyond all breaking will be met with in the lives to come. The period between lives can never be the subject of relatable experience, and anything said of it rests on a different footing from the principles and doctrines above set out, for these are not only the accumulated experience of mankind, but are capable of verification by all who study them. But the same immemorial wisdom is as precise about the period between lives as it is clear in its condemnation of Bhuta worship, the intercourse with the astral remains of the dead which the West calls spiritualism. The purpose of this book being to make karma and rebirth a living reality in the mind of those who accept it, any discussion on post-mortem states of being is only of marginal interest, but for the sake of completeness reference may be made to Letter XXV of the Mahama Letters to A.P. Sinnet, where the subject, referred to casually in numerous works of Eastern wisdom, is usefully summed up. There are two fields of causal manifestation, the objective and subjective. So the grosser energies, those which operate in the heavier or denser conditions of matter, manifest objectively in physical life, their outcome being the new personality of each birth included within the grand cycle of the evolving individuality. The moral and spiritual activities find their sphere of effects in Devachan. Bacon, for instance, whom a poet called the greatest, wisest, meanest of mankind, might reappear in his next incarnation as a greedy money-getter with extraordinary intellectual capacities. But the moral and spiritual qualities of the previous Bacon would also have to find a field in which their energies could expand themselves. Devachan is such a field. Hence, the writer goes on, all his plans for moral reform, of research into the abstract principles of nature, all his divine aspirations would find their fruition in Devachan, the abode of the gods, and the entity previously known as Bacon would, in a dreamlike state of consciousness, digest all previous experience until karma is satisfied in that direction. The ripple of force reaches the edge of the cyclic basin, and the being moves into the next area of causes, i.e., the next rebirth. This alternation of states of consciousness, objective in the body and subjective out of it, has been poetically described as a string of black and white beads alternating, strung on the thread of life. But while it is in the subjective state, the brooding soul, wrapped in the process of digesting past experience, can never descend to earthly consciousness, and those who wish to communicate with the dead can only do so by ascending in consciousness to the exalted realm of mind in which they dream. In time, after a period which may cover hundreds of years, the hand of karma begins to draw the dreamer back to waking consciousness. Desire for fresh experience, choosing a body and other environment according to its needs, impels these higher vehicles of the evolving man to assume fresh worldly garments, and so the pilgrim wakes on earth to new discovery and a new old treading of the way. As when one layeth his worn-out robes away, and, taking new ones, saith, "These will I wear today." So putteth by the Spirit lightly its garb of flesh, and passeth to inherit a residence afresh. The birth may be in the lowest savage or in a prince of virtue, but it will not be in anything less. The degraded belief in rebirth in animal form can be shown to be another example of a spiritual truth misunderstood. It is all a coarse symbol caricaturing the inner vital truth of reincarnation, says Mr. Walker, who studied the subject closely, springing from the striking resemblance between men and animals in feature and disposition, in voice and mien. Once consciousness attains to human level, there is no return. If evil reaches a stage beyond redemption, there may be an utter dissolution of that entity. Otherwise, though man may become a superman, he will never be less than man. There are various objections put forward to belief in the doctrine of rebirth, and they are always the same. The first is that we do not remember previous lives. The answer is simple, that the brain is new to each life. Memory is a faculty of the mind, not of the brain, which is its temporary instrument, and memory is the power to re-read the indelible records made by every thought and deed in the atmosphere around us. In some way nature preserves in the Akasha, the substance of manifestation in its finest form, a record which may be accurately read by those whose spiritual powers have been developed, and it is by this power to contact the Akashic records that the Buddha, for example, could describe at length the details of his own past lives. But though the average person remembers nothing of the past, there are thousands who, through a lower psychic development, occasionally recall their own past lives and speak of it. But the psychic world in which these chance impressions are picked up by the receptive mind is a world of illusion. Only the trained disciple of a master of nature's forces can speak with accuracy of these things, and it would be part of his training not only to dare and to do, but also to keep silent. Moreover, few of those who complain that they do not remember would be brave enough to do so were they suddenly given the power. The obscuring of memory, writes Owen Rutter, is surely merciful. The remembrance of all the wrongs we have done and all the wrongs which have been done to us, throughout our chain of lives, would be an intolerable burden. Most of us have enough to contend with in this life without burdening ourselves with the recollection of the dangers, the fears and the hates of other lives. 1. All that we hate and despise in the acts of others we ourselves have sometimes done, and paid for, or are paying now. Would it help our present striving up the mountainside to learn of the loathsome acts and thoughts and feelings of our own dead selves? The law is wise, and it is well that the brain, the newly created instrument of each rebirth, has only its present folly to remember. As it is, we remember only 1/10 of the last week's happenings, and only 1,000th part of the year before. The inner mind is garnering all the time what it needs from the lessons of experience, and the wise man knows that though it is sometimes right to remember, it is often wise to forget. The second objection usually raised is the injustice of our suffering for the deeds of someone about whom we remember nothing. The answer is the same. It is the inner mind, the reincarnating entity, which draws from the universal memory the lessons it would learn. The man who has forgotten, the man who complains is, though he has a new brain, the man whose deeds he suffers, is the karma of which he now complains. The third objection is that rebirth is disproved by the doctrine of heredity. This, of course, ignores the difference between the mind that uses the body and the body produced by its parents' union. The former chooses a body, in the sense that it is drawn by the laws of attraction to that body which is suitable to the working out of its dharma, its karma for that birth. The body obeys the laws of heredity, of the rebirth of the body. The mind obeys the law of karma rebirth, of the rebirth of the soul. Finally, the objection is often raised that the doctrine is uncongenial. I don't want to come back to this world of misery and toil, the complainer says. The law replies, who cares about your likes and dislikes, you who claim to be separate? In essence you are part of the law, and made it so. If a brick falls on my head I may dislike the law of gravity, but I don't deny that it exists. And why this fierce objection to return? He who understands the law knows that all causes have effects, and that all effects have sprung from causes. The deeds of the past must be digested. Where? The obvious and reasonable answer is here, on earth, and if the sufferer dislikes this life it is he who made it so.